Now arriving at Thomastown.
This Thomo Life is proudly brought to you by Yarra Plenty Regional Libraries, Thomastown branch. On today's program we have Bronwyn Halfpenny, Member of the Legislative Assembly, State Member for the District of Thomastown. Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Dean Mirando. Bronwyn Halfpenny was elected 2010, re-elected 2014, and has an upcoming election 2018. Politics have always been part of Bronwyn's life.
It was all my family. I think you sort of don't necessarily think you're going to get a job in this area, but I think it starts off as your way of life, I suppose, the way you look at life. So my father, yes, he was in union. My mother was also a political person. My grandparents used to knock on doors, talking about supporting peace and asking people to sign petitions against nuclear armaments many years ago. So I guess it was a whole, as I said, a bit of a way of life. And most members of my family had a sort of social justice or a belief in a better world, and that we have to actually do something about making a better world. You can't just sit back and wait for it to happen. My father was a fitter and turner by trade, and then when he became sort of a union leader, which he was, John Halfpenny, he then got about a 10% wage increase, which was the lead in hand allowance, because the wages of union officials at that time were linked to the job they used to do on the factory floor. And my mother worked a couple of days a week in an office. Sometimes I think people think because someone's well known, they used to sort of think, I must have gone to private schools, Ivanhoe Grammar, and which is actually just not true. And then my father and mother sort of split up and basically was in a single parent family, and my mother was on a pension for a number of years while we were sort of growing up as well. So that's where I came from. I then went up to secondary school, state secondary schools, and then I applied for university. I was the first in my family of all members of my family, both extended and that, to go to university. And I moved to Adelaide and went to the university over there, Flinders University, for 1 year, and then came back and finished an economics degree at La Trobe. And the reason I did economics is I sort of thought that the economic system was wrong, it was unfair, it didn't equally treat people and all of that. So I sort of had this, I guess, bit of a airy-fairy idea that you needed to learn the economic theory of the day in order to sort of argue against it and to say we should have a better system. But ever since I left university, I haven't opened an economics book, and I probably haven't done anything relevant to my economics training.
Politicians need to have a passion, dedication. What are Bronwyn's?
I hope, or I feel that human rights, I have a passion about human rights. So, for example, and you try to incorporate your beliefs and your values and your feelings about things like human rights or justice into your job as a Member of Parliament. So I'll give an example. I feel very strongly about Palestinian people and the way that they're being treated. The fact that there's all those illegal settlements taking over the land and really just being treated in an unequal and inhumane way in a lot of cases. So I work pretty heavily with the Palestinian Community Association that are based, by coincidence, in Thomastown. And I also, we've set up a Victorian Parliamentary Friends of Palestine. So I sort of try to use the position I hold to, if I can in any way, sort of promote that cause and highlight what's sort of going on in the Palestinian territories.
So let's learn about Bronwyn's parliamentary role, what it entails and what areas it covers.
I am a member of the Legislative Assembly, which is MLA, so that's a state member of Parliament. And there's two houses in the state parliament. There's the Assembly, which is green in colour, and you've got the Council, Legislative Council, which is sort of the red in colour, on letterheads and if you go into Parliament and on the carpets. So the Legislative Assembly is that's the house that sort of introduces legislation, debates all the legislation, and the council is sort of considered the house of review to then look at and amend and change, but they can't necessarily deal with and introduce legislation in the same way as the Assembly. So that's sort of the difference. A person in the Assembly has a smaller area than an upper house member has a larger area, because they're often not really dealing with the same constituent issues and having as much involvement with the community, although there is exceptions to the rule by individual people. The district of Thomastown, and each district is really named after one suburb, which is very confusing because you actually represent many suburbs. So you've got, the member for Carrum, the member for Bendigo, but they might represent Castlemaine and, Mordy Alec or whatever. So in Thomastown, the electorate covers Wollert, Epping, Thomastown, Laylaw, and a portion of Reservoir. So it used to be it used to be basically between Marnie's Road and Cooper Street was the boundaries, but there was a redistribution in the last election in 2014, which now means that Thomastown almost doubled geographically in size, and now I represent people living all the way up to Summerhill Road. So it's a little bit of a learning curve for me, because I've been advocating and representing and working and sort of living with people in the established suburbs. So there are, a lot of things in common, but also some really difficult and big needs in the growth areas, because there's a lack of infrastructure of every sort, whether it's schools, health, roads, public transport. And hopefully we've been sort of working to, some would say not quick enough, but hopefully we've been working to try to fix up some of these things.
I wanted to talk about one of the problems in the area, and one of those being traffic, to get an idea of how her role works. No,
the traffic is... I sort of feel proud to be part of the campaign that succeeded in getting my government, the Labor Party, to make an election commitment to connect the Ahearns Road onto the Hume Freeway. And that was a community-based campaign, a really good example, I think, of where people getting together, standing up together in a united way, is able to make a change or get what it is that they want. Because one of the problems here, I find sometimes people think they've got no power, they feel that there's no point doing anything. But I always point to that and say, yes, you can do things. Here is a fantastic example. Now, I think people would also say it's taken too long, and I totally agree with that. It has taken a long time, but it is happening. The roundabout will be removed. The Epping-Findon Road roundabout will be removed this year, and the interchange and the duplication of the Ahearns Road will start this year.
I think one of the biggest concerns from residents in Thomastown is that council government take too long to get things done. The infamous red tape.
I don't know if I like calling it red tape, because red tape sometimes means to me is deregulation, which is often takes away protections from people, whether it's in their wages or 4, 5, 7 visas or food standards or something. But definitely there is a lot of hurdles and obstacles that in government that I never even would have in my wildest dreams even thought was there. And I know even like the Premier, to be honest, was sort of a bit shocked. Well, how come you can't build a road in a year? This is the thing. But then we sort of get told, well, you have to do your environmental surveys, your heritage surveys. They then go off to the federal government. They stay there 6 months for them to be looked at, determined if it's all okay, then sent back. You have to do studies of where all the gas pipes are and the electricity wires and all these things. So I can sort of understand there is a lot of things that need to be looked at in the background, but it still seems a very long time to take for things to be done. And I think, but although the City Link is probably an example where that's pretty done very quickly, and some of the removal of level crossings have been done pretty quick. And I would say that the more pressure that people put on, yes, the more it's in government mind. I don't know whether it can always be done much quicker, but at least it's always in people's mind, and at least you're going to get the communication. And it makes my job easier to be saying, look, I'm getting all these calls, I'm getting all these people really frustrated. Something's got to be done about this.